The history of colonization. 1415, a Portuguese prince, Henry the Navigator, becomes fascinated by exploration down the coast of Africa and commissions successive voyages. 1420, the Portuguese, discovering the lush and uninhabited island of Madeira, send colonists to settle it. 1427, a Portuguese captain, sailing for Henry the Navigator, chances upon the Azores. In 1439, Portuguese settlers are sent to the unoccupied islands. In 1446, Portugal claims ownership of the region of Guinea, subsequently the center of their slave trade on the west coast of Africa. 1450, the caravel, a ship developed in the Mediterranean and used down the west coast of Africa, is adapted by the Portuguese for Atlantic use. 1456, a Portuguese navigator discovers some of the Cape Verde Islands, tropical and at this time uninhabited. In 1462, Portuguese settlers are sent to establish the island of Santiago. 1466, the Portuguese settlers on the Cape Verde Islands are granted a monopoly on the new slave trade. 1483, the Portuguese establish a further presence on the west coast of Africa, at the mouth of the Congo River. 1488, Moroccans invade the Kingdom of Mali. 1500, the Portuguese establish trading posts in East Africa on the coast of Mozambique. 1503, the Portuguese set up a trading post on the African island of Zanzibar. 1509, the invention of the wheel lock. 1542, Portugal helps Ethiopia in the Arab invasion. 1550, in Italy, the Beretta family branches into guns. Africans brought in the Portuguese trade posts of Africa are shipped across the Atlantic as slaves. 1562, Britain begins slave trade in Africa. 1570, Angola becomes a Portuguese colony. 1630, the first true flintlock. 1638, the French build a trading station on the Senegal River in East Africa. In 1439, Holland seizes Portugal's Lem, Saint-Tropez, and La Anda trading posts. The French become involved in the slave trade, and Britain invades Gambia. In 1652, the Dutch established a settlement at the Cape of Good Hope. In 1657, the Dutch in South Africa purchased slaves to do domestic and agricultural work. In 1659, France invades Senegal. In 1660, the Kingdom of Congo is defeated by Portuguese. In 1689, British Parliament adopts the Bill of Rights, including a right to bear arms. In 1698, a fleet of Ottoman evict the Portuguese from Mombasa and Zanzibar. 1701 marks the beginning of the Asante Empire, which would last in sovereignty until 1896. 1718, British lawyer James Puckle patents the first machine gun. 1770, the Triangle Trade, controlled from Livermore, ships millions of Africans across the Atlantic as slaves. 1776 marks the start of the American Revolution. 1787, a British ship lands a party of free slaves as the first modern settlers in Sierra Leone, on the west coast of Africa. 1795, Dutch Boers began calling themselves Afrikaners to emphasize that Africa is their native land. With the Dutch entering the war on the side of the French, British seized the valuable Cape Colony in South Africa. 1797, British forces captured the South African Cape Town colony from the Dutch. 1802, the Treaty of Amiens restores the Cape of Good Hope to the Netherlands. In 1805, the Muhammad Ali dynasty begins its rule of Egypt. It would last until 1953. In 1806, the British recaptured the Cape of Good Hope from the Dutch. In 1807, Britain abolishes the slave trade. In 1808, the British government uses Freetown in Sierra Leone as a base in the fight against the slave trade. In 1809, the British imposed so-called Hottentot Code, protecting Africans at the Cape, but also tying them to the employer's fields. In 1816, the British established Bathurst at the mouth of Gambia as a base against the slave trade. In 1886, Shaka Zulu establishes the Zulu Kingdom and starts fighting against the British forces in their invasion. In 1818, Richard Gatling, an American inventor, is born in America. In 1820, the first big influx of British soldiers, numbering 5,000, arrive at Cape Town in South Africa. In 1821, the American Colonization Society buys the area later known as Liberia to settle freed slaves. In 1882, the first shiploads of free slaves would reach Liberia from the United States. In 1827, the French invade the city of Algiers. In 1830, the Portuguese banned the shipping of slaves from the coast of Angola. In 1835, the first Colt revolver is developed. Abdi el-Kadir proclaims a holy war against the French in Algeria and begins a military campaign that will last for 8 years. British sends 4 naval ships up the river Niger to make anti-slave treaties with the local kings. In 1843, the British take control of existing Boer Republic and proclaim Natal a British proctorate. In 1845, Great Britain introduces a system of segregation in Natal. In 1847, Liberia wins independence and international recognition as a republic. In 1847, the telegraph is invented. In 1848, Harry Smith annexes for British the land between the Orange and Vaal rivers, calling it the Orange River Sovereignty. In 1850, the British government buys the Danish fortress on the Gold Coast. In 1850 as well, the true shotgun is now in common use. In 1857, the Boers of South Transvaal declared independence as a South African republic. In 1860, Indian indentured laborers are brought to Natal to work in the sugar plantations. Morocco succeeds Ifni and Western Sahara to Spain. In 1860 to 1862, Spain occupies the Rift. In 1861, Lagos on the coast of Nigeria is annexed as a British property. In 1868, the British government annexes Basutoland. In 1869, the British, French, and Italian joint forces take control of Tunisia. In 1870, the Franco-German War begins. In 1871, the first cartridge revolver is invented. In 1873, the Winchester rifle is introduced. In 1874, the southern region of present-day Ghana is invaded and destroyed by the British Empire. In 1876, Leopold II hosts a conference in Brussels on the subject of opening up the African continent. In 1877, the British government annexes the Boer Republic in Transvaal. In 1879, the British forces incite what will be called the Zulu War. Later that year, Zulu tribesmen surprise and annihilate a British army encamped nearby. France invades Tunisia, and the treaty forces the rulers to accept the status of a French proctorate. In 1882, Stanley establishes a foothold for Leopold II on the southern bank of Congo, a site he now calls Leopoldville. In 1883, French Marines land in Madagascar to protect French interests and assert French control. In 1884, General Gordon marches south to protect Khartoum from the advancing forces of the Madai. Bismarck launches the colonial scramble for Africa by suddenly annexing 3 territories for Germany. These would be Togo, Cameroon, and Anariga. The Boer Republic regains its independence from Great Britain. Spain begins to colonize the Western Sahara, subsequently known as Spanish Sahara. In 1885, Bismarck grants Karl Peter a charter to rule the German Proctorate in East Africa. The British government annexes as a protectorate to secure the trade route from the Cape into Central Africa. Italian troops occupy Eritrea. a province of Ethiopia. German warships arrived in Zanzibar harbor to persuade the Sultan to concede territory to the Kaiser William I. In 1886, Germany and Britain defined neighboring spheres of influence in East Africa. The German and British agreement in East Africa creates the present-day boundaries between Tunisia and Kenya. In 1888, the Imperial British East African Company is given a charter to administer Kenya and Uganda. In 1889, the French and the British agree to colonial boundaries for Senegal and Gambia in West Africa. Ethiopia succeeds the province of Eritrea to Italy. In 1890, Zanzibar, under its Arab Sultan, is declared a British protectorate. In 1891, Germany takes control of German East Africa as a protectorate. The British cede the tiny island of Heligoland to Germany in return for vast areas of Africa. In 1892, the Maxim machine guns settles a Protestant-Catholic clash in Kampala, the capital of Buganda. The French established a protectorate in part of the ancient kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa. In 1893, the French claimed the Ivory Coast in Africa as French territory. In 1895, the territory of Zambezi is given the name Rhodesia, in honor of the man who has colonized it. The British government take responsibility for Kenya as an East African protectorate. The Ethiopian emperor inflicts a shattering defeat on Italian forces at Adwa. The British government unites Buganda and 3 other colonies into a single Ugandan protectorate. In 1897, Zululand, which had been annexed by the British in 1887, is now merged with the colony of Natal. Germany claims Urundi as a joint colony adjacent to German East Africa. The French exile the Queen of Madagascar and claim the island as a French colony. The British government burns Benin City in punishment for members of the British delegation being murdered. In 1899, the Sudan begins a half-century of supposedly joint rule by Great Britain and Egypt. In 1900, the British Army takes Pretoria and annexes both of the Boer republics. The British government assumes direct responsibility for the entire region of Nigeria, previously entrusted to a commercial company. 1903, British consulate in Congo Free State discovers appalling abuses by the Belgian companies. In 1904, a violent uprising by Herero warriors in South Africa target male Germans of military age. In response, the German general Lothar von Trotha drives 8,000 Herero people to a slow death in the Kalahari Desert. In 1905, the Maji Maji uprising results in an alarming outbreak of violence in German East Africa. The German commanders manufacture a famine in retaliation. In 1906, France gains informal control of Morocco. Belgium annexes the Congo. In 1909, national delegates from the 4 provincial parliaments drop a draft constitution for a South African Union. Mineral discoveries on the border of northern Rhodesia and the Belgian Congo give the first hint of the riches of the Copper Belt. 1910, the Union of South Africa becomes an independent dominion within the British Empire. 3 French colonies south of the Sahara are consolidated as French Equatorial Africa. 1911, Italy invades Libya, a province of the Turkish Empire. Copper mining begins in Tangana, soon to be followed by the extradition of even more profitable diamonds. In 1912, France and Spain agree that Spain shall be the colonial power in the north of Morocco and France in the south. In 1912, the U.S. Army tests the first mounted machine gun on a plane. In 1914, British rule is consolidated in Nigeria by merging the north and south into a single colony. The British government changes the status of Egypt from a Turkish province to a British protectorate. British and French forces invade the German colony of Togoland. 1915, British and French forces invade and capture the British colony of Cameroon. And South African troops capture German Southwest Africa. In 1916, British and French forces win full control of the German colonies of Togoland and Cameroon. And that year, the first tanks are used by British forces against the Germans. In June of that year, Belgian forces from the Congo occupied the German colony of Rwanda, Urundi. In 1918, the commander of the German army in West Africa surrenders to British forces. In 1919, it is decided that the German East Africa will now be governed by the British. In 1920, the National Party in Tunisia demands full independence from the French. Young Kakai Association is formed in Kenya to fight for African rights and the restoration of Kikuyu land. Morocco wins a stunning victory over Spanish forces and gains control of the Rif. 1922, Egypt becomes an independent kingdom, subject to British military presence to protect the Suez Canal. The League of Nations gives France and Britain mandates to govern separate areas of the German colonies of Cameroon. France and Britain are given League of Nations mandate to govern separate areas of the German colony of Togoland. In 1923, the African National Congress is formed in South Africa by renaming the South African National Native Congress. Rhodesia becomes a self-governing colony with political power exclusively in the hands of European settlers. 1924, the League of Nations grants Belgium a mandate to administer the former German colony of Rwanda. The British government takes on administration of Northern Rhodesia from the British South Africa Company. In 1926, the Balfour Report by the UK Prime Minister suggests the way forward for the British Commonwealth of Nations. 1928, Jomo Kenyatta becomes the editor of the newspaper of the Kiku Central Association. 1933, the Hutus and Tutsi of Rwanda are issued racial identity cards by the Belgians. 1935, Mussolini invades Ethiopia. 1936, the Italian forces invading Ethiopia reach Addis Ababa, and Haile Selassie flees into exile. 1941, Adolf Hitler authorizes the development of the V-2 missile. The Allies recover Ethiopia from the Italians, and Haile Selassie returns to his throne in Addis Ababa. 1942, Algerian nationalists produce a manifesto demanding independence from France. 1944, Germany launches its first V-2 missile at Paris, France. 1945, Gamal Abdel Nasser and army colleagues form a secret party, the Free Officers, to fight for an independent Ethiopian republic. Demonstrators in Algeria spark off an uprising against French rule, which is put down with the loss of 10,000 Muslim lives. In 1947, the AK-47 is created. 1951, Libya wins independence from Italy. 1952, a group of officers led by Gamal Abdel Nasser depose Egypt's king and send him into exile. Ahmad Ben Bella forms the Front de Liberation Nation to fight for Algerian independence. The FLN. An outbreak of resistance attacks in Kenya is orchestrated by a secret Kikuyu organization, the Mau Mau. 1953, Jomo Kenyatta, charged with having organized the Mau Mau uprising in Kenya, is sentenced to 7 years in prison. The two Rhodesias and Nyasaland are merged into the self-governing Federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. 1954, a radical manifesto and acts of terrorism alert the world to the emergence of the FLN, committed to the independence of Algeria. In 1954, the first Uzi machine guns were first made by Israel Machine Industries. 1955, an armed uprising in Morocco persuades France to accept the principle of independence for the colony. In 1956, The Sudan, declining the opportunity to union with Egypt, opts for independence as a separate state. Tunisia wins independence from France. French Morocco and Spanish Morocco win independence from the two colonial powers. British Togo is merged with the neighboring colony of the Gold Coast. The Gold Coast, 1957, the Gold Coast wins independence under the new name of Historic Residence, which is Ghana. The FNLA is established with the support of the U.S. as a military group to fight against non-communist independent Angola. In 1958, French Algerians seized control of government buildings in Algiers in a campaign to ensure that Algerians remain French. The colony of French Guinea opts for immediate independence as the Republic of Guinea, breaking its links with France. 1960, the UK Prime Minister warns the white settlers of Africa that the winds of change is blowing through their continent. French Cameroon becomes an independent republic as Cameroon. UNIP, a new party fighting for the independence of North Rhodesia, forms. French Togo becomes independent as the Republic of Togo. French Sudan becomes independent as the Republic of Mali. Madagascar becomes independent. Lumumba becomes Prime Minister of the newly independent Democratic Republic of Congo, previously Belgian Congo. The Southwest Africa Organization is founded to fight against South African control of Namibia. British and Italian colonies merge as the independent Somali Republic, also known as Somalia. Anti-European riots in the Congo caused some 25,000 Belgians to flee the country. The French colony of Dahomey becomes an independent state, but suffers 6 military coups in the first 12 years. Niger becomes independent. Kenyatta, still in prison, is elected leader of the KANU, a political party in Kenya. The French colony of Upper Volta becomes independent as Burkina Faso. The first president of the newly independent Ivory Coast is elected, beginning a 33-year term of relatively peaceful rule. The French colony of Chad becomes independent. The French colony of Gabon becomes independent, electing its own president. The French colony of Ubangi Shari becomes independent and takes the name the Central African Republic. The French Congo becomes independent as the Republic of Congo. The French colony of Senegal becomes independent, electing its first president. The French colony of Mauritania becomes independent. The French colony of Sierra Leone becomes an independent state within the Commonwealth. The Zimbabwe African People's Union is formed in the British colony of Southern Rhodesia. The southern part of British Cameroon votes to merge with Cameroon, becoming the Federal Republic of Cameroon. 1962. Frelimo emerges as a Marxist guerrilla group dedicated to winning independence for Mozambique. Ian Smith's white supremacy party, the Rhodesia Front, wins power in Rhodesia's election. Massive yes vote in a referendum is immediately followed by French recognition of Algerian independence. The former British colony of Uganda becomes an independent republic. 1963, the OAU, Organization of African Unity, is founded in Addis Ababa to give Africans a unified voice in world affairs. Zanzibar becomes an independent nation and member of the Commonwealth. Kenya becomes independent with Jomo Kenyatta as Prime Minister.